Chapter 9, On the Trail. From the book Baffled to Fight Better by Oswald Chambers, dated 1917. Job, chapters 12 through 14. Number 1, the charge of invenerated intolerance. Chapter 12, verse 1 through 5. Job is speaking almost in a mood of annoyancy. He is rebelling against the intolerancy in the minds of his friends. They not give him credit for having any common sense. When we talk with a man who is dealing with the fundamentals, he appears to pay no attention to any common sense explanation we offer, because his deep is beyond our deep, and we instantly credit him with having no common sense and get back into our own shallows again. A religious view has the ban of finality about it, which causes a man to deal only with the shallow side. The friends have charged Job with the lack of seeing the obvious, and Job replies, I am facing things you have not begun to dream about. Why don't you either plunge into the deeps with me, or else keep silent if you cannot tell me what to do? Number 2, common sense of irrefutable inferences. Job chapter 5, verses 6 to 25. Job accuses the friends of telling lies for the honor of God. This is the danger of taking a theological point of view and putting it first. It leads a man to tell a lie in order to be consistent with his own point of view. Job is speaking here with the view not of disproving God, but of disproving that the religious concepts of these men are right. The things he states are common sense, obvious things that they flatly contradict the creed that he had believed, and which his friends are pushing down his throat. Am I going to remain true to my religious convictions, or to the God who lives beyond them? Am I going to remain true to my denominational view of God, or to the God who gave the denomination its initial inspiration? Am I going to be a mere stickler for the theological statement? Theology is tested by history and logic. Religion must be tested by experience. The religious creed which Job held has crumbled into ruins. Therefore he says, I leave my creed, but I deny that I have left God. In a theological dispute, the theologian is apt to put the point of view in the place of God. If any man is contentious, we have no such practice, says St. Paul. Only one man in 1,000 can maintain his spiritual life and controvert. He may increase his intellectual vim, but he does not increase his spiritual grasp of things. Dr. Alexander White put this better than any other when he said, Oh, the unmitigated curse of controversy! Oh, the detestable passions that corrections and contradictions kindle up to fury in the proud heart of man. Ensue controversy, my brethren, as you would ensue the entrance of hell itself. Let them have it their way. Let them talk, let them write. Let them correct you, let them transduce you. Let them judge and condemn you. Let them slay you. Rather, let the truth of God suffer itself, than that love suffer. You have not enough of the divine nature in you to be a controversialist. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. Who, when he was reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not. But by his stripes we are healed. Heal me, praise Augustine again and again, of that lust of mine of always vindicating myself. Unquote. We start out with the notion that God is an almighty piece of ourselves, but God can never be on the side of any individual. The question we have to ask is, am I on God's side? In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, Paul is talking about the invincible ignorancy of fanaticism, and he further says that every man who is deluded is himself to blame. chapter 5, verse 10. Job, on the other hand, says, I am not going to say that my old definition of God is true. God must be true, but I find the way I have expounded him is not true. This put Job on the right trail to find God. Am I on the trail of God or on the obstinate, intolerant line, where I argue for my statements instead of the truth? For the truth. Does my religion put me on the line of understanding the revelation of God, or it is merely a blind authority? Is it a good thing to take stock of the things which common sense, inferences, and religion cannot explain? Number 3, the conception of invincible ignorancy. Chapter 13, chapter 5, 1 through 12. Verse 12 is a description of fanaticism, which builds on one point of view only, and is determinately ignorant of everything else. This is the thing Job rages against all the time. In verse 3 he says, God must be other than you have stated, because of what I have experienced, and Job is right. It is possible to build logical edifices on a theological position, and at the same time prove the position to be wrong in practical life. For instance, the predestinations of God are clear on the metaphysical line, but in the actual facts of life they prove dangerously false. The theological view ought to be examined constantly. If I put it in the place of God, I become invincibly ignorant. That is, I will not accept any other point of view, and the invincible ignorancy of fanaticism leads to delusion for which I alone am to blame. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 10. In practical life, the fundamental thing is not the thing which can be proved logically. In the ecclesiastical history of Scotland, many a man has gone to martyrdom rather than let his theology go. The organized church is up against such things as this today. Watch where you are inclined to be invincibly ignorant, and you will find your point of view leads you to break down in the most vital thing. An acceptable view of God has caused many of man to fail at the critical minute. It has kept him from being the kind of man he ought to be, and only when he has abandoned his view of God for God himself does he become the right kind of man. Number 4, the consecration of instinctive integrity. Job chapter 5, verse 13 through 28. Job feels that in spite of all that is happening, God's integrity remains, and his own integrity also. His sufferings are not to be explained by saying, I am being punished because I have done wrong, or your creed says that I am wrong, therefore I suffer, or I am suffering because I need perfecting. The friends accuse Job of being a hypocrite and imply that he is also an atheist. But just at this time, Job gives expression to the most sublime utterance in the Old Testament. Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Though he, whom you are misrepresenting, and whom I cannot state in words, though he slay me, I will trust in the fact that he is full of the integrity I believe him to be, and I will wait for him. I will face my own common sense integrity and dictate my instinctive sense of God's integrity. And in the end, I know that God and I will work out into one. Always remain true to facts and to the instinctive certainty that God must be just, and do not try to justify him too quickly. The juggling trick tries to justify God for allowing sin and the war. Sin and war are absolutely unjustifiable, and yet the instinct of every Christian is. I know perfectly well that in the end God will justify himself, but in the meantime I cannot justify him completely except by a venture of faith that cannot logically demonstrate. Number 5, the consciousness of implicit conformity. Job chapter 14. Job has discovered that the basis of things is tragic and not logical. To get there means that a man is on the right trail. I know I am weak, and there are facts in my life and in human history which I cannot explain. But because of the fact of my conscious infirmity, I know that thou wilt see me through it all, and out the other side. And meanwhile I refuse to accept a creed which misrepresents thee and misrepresents me also. Job's integrity remains, as well as his conscious infirmity, and also the sense that he is not entirely to blame for his sin. No man is held responsible for having a heredity of sin, but God does hold a man responsible for refusing to let Jesus Christ deliver him from sin. John chapter 3, verse 19. According to average theology, Job's statements in this chapter sound far from right, and yet they are in reality full of reverency, while the statements of his friends are full of blasphemy. Job states the facts of human experience, and there seems to be an unsatisfactory end to human life. Just when I was going to grasp the thing and find the fulfillment of all my desires, I am cut off. There are countless men like that today. Just when life was at its best and highest, suddenly they are swept clean off. Job says that in any statement of God, there must be some indication that he will be justified in these things, some explanation which will justify God in allowing human beings to be infirm. Your statement of God, Job says, is not only untrue to man, but blasphemously untrue to God. Job chapter 5, verse 13 through 22. To get an expression of what Job is saying here when we say of a certain man, well, he is dead now, and though he did not come up to the standard of our Orthodox religion, we will leave him in the hands of the merciful God. This is a subterfuge. Job states the facts and is strong on the point that he will get to the place where he will see the justification of God in all that he has allowed to happen. Never take a suspended judgment as final, but watch for the chance to get fresh light on it. It is never sufficient to have a mental safety valve as the end of a thing. There are many problems arising from instinctive integrity which have not been answered. Yet, no theology has made answer to them. We have to watch that we do not accept any statement of God which would make us believe what our instinctive nature says is a lie. We have our guide in Jesus Christ, and we should never accept any view of God that contradicts that which is manifested in him. Jesus Christ is the light, and the vital thing is to get on the trail of a personal relationship to God, and then use the facts of experience and revelation to bring us to a consideration of things which satisfies our nature, and until it is satisfied, do not let us say it is. I will stick to the fact that I believe thou art a God of love and justice, and I will look forward to the time when I will see it manifestly. We have no business to say piously, "Oh, I leave it with God." God will have us discern what he is doing. But it takes time because we are so slow to obey, and only as we obey do we perceive morally and spiritually.